Thank you for joining us for Eye on Iowa. I'm Sarah Muller, a Forbes reporter, and I'm here with presidential hopeful Perry Johnson. Perry, thank you so much for joining
Well,
me.
thank you for having me.
We have so much to talk about, but first of all, you ran for governor and
I
were
did.
disqualified,
Yes.
but now you're running for president. What went into that decision making, and why not try another state office?
Well, the reality of life is that I think the country is going in the wrong direction. I look at what's going on, and we're reckless in our spending. The only reason we have inflation right now is that the government spent too much money. They essentially threw all this money out there without goods and services for that money. So we spent 20 years trying to get inflation above 2%. And then all of a sudden, we now spend $4.50 for a dozen eggs, thank the government. We go out there and we spend $3 to $3.50 for a gallon of gas instead of $1.75, thank the government. But the biggest problem that I see is that we have gone from 19.9 trillion in debt to 32 trillion in debt in 6 years. And that reckless spending has destroyed the moral fabric of America. Keep in mind how America has changed. About 20 years ago, you had 70% of Americans that thought that patriotism was important. Now that number is down to 39%. About 20 years ago, you had roughly, I guess it was 63% of the people thought religion was important. Now we're down to 38 to 39%. And more importantly, we have to recognize that this fabric of America is critical. That is what's caused us to be the greatest country. And 20 years ago, 59% of the people thought it was nice to have kids. They were going to have kids and looking forward to it. Now we're down to 30%. And what's the major goal people have now? What has really increased? They want to make money. And this reckless spending has caused the middle class and the heart of America to really suffer. Is there any tax that is more egregious than inflation? What I really get a kick out of is when you listen to the CNBC, and I listen to them, and they will say, okay, inflation really isn't that bad. It's only up 4.4% when you exclude food, energy, and housing. Well, we exclude food, energy, and housing. What is left for the middle class? Food, energy, and housing, aren't they the biggest expenses? So I decided that I have to do something to change it. The beauty of this is I get an opportunity to talk to people and get them to understand. It's pretty hard to do that in a 30-second commercial. But when I'm in Iowa, I can actually sit down, talk to people, reason it out, get them to understand what's going on. And you know what? I think my message is resonating.
I'm so glad you're bringing up commercials because you spent quite a pretty penny on your Super Bowl commercial, which has the infamous ad that I think we've all seen, if not on YouTube. What went into that decision to spend that money on a giant Super Bowl ad focused on Iowans?
Well, if you're going to decide to enter a race and you spent your whole life trying to avoid politics or even getting in the spotlight, and then you suddenly say, okay, I'm going to run for the highest office in the land, I think you better have something that really hits the people and hits home. And I don't think anything hits home more than recognizing that our government needs to go on a diet.
Yes, the famous diet line. Well, let's talk a little bit about the money because this week it was reported that you had $2 million on hand and that you spent $3.7 million on your own campaign. Now, tell me a little bit about your fundraising, or if not fundraising. Yes, exactly. If not fundraising, then what you're putting into your own campaign.
Well, I mean, it's no secret. I mean, I own over 70 companies. We operate in 70 companies. I operate in over 61 countries. You know, I've never had a company go bankrupt. None of my companies have any personal debt. You know, I mean, none of my companies have debt. I have no personal debt. Obviously, I have a fair amount of money. So I am going to fund the campaign, whatever it takes.
Would you be willing to share with us what your net worth is?
That's a very dangerous thing. Unlike Trump, I would just as soon have the lowest net worth listed as possible, particularly when you consider the situation that they're trying to tax people on a certain amount over whatever assets they are, right? But in my case, because I'm my own banker, and because, frankly, I don't even need financial statements because we have no debt. And you have to keep in mind that a lot of my companies, I have residual revenue, and we're the largest player in so many areas. You know, I'm very secure. So I don't really want to get involved in having people say I'm worth X, Y, Z. I just have plenty of money. I mean, obviously, when I buy my plane, I pay cash. House, I pay cash. Everything I do, if I need to start a new company, I fund it.
And you're funding your own campaign.
I am.
And on top of that, we have also heard, on top of the famous diet commercial, you want to cut federal spending by 2%. What would you actually do when you cut that, and what maybe departments or, areas would you cut?
Well, the reality of the matter is that the government spends too much money. You know that, and I know that. I would get rid of the Department of Education, for starters. I mean, what do? They accomplish very little. Only about 8% of the money goes to the people in K through 12th grade, and they want to dictate how we run our lives. I say, let's eliminate those 40. We don't need 4,400 people in the Department of Education telling us what to do, spending all that money, and essentially accomplishing nothing. We can just send that money directly to the students, and they can go to school where they want. But the reality of the matter is, in government, you have to understand how it works. It's unlike anything you could imagine. The government goes out of its way every single year to spend every penny in that budget. So if I had $100 in that budget and come April and I have $35 left, I've got a manager pushing me to make sure every dime is spent so I can get $105 next year. We're going to change that. Instead, we're going to freeze it. And we're going to say, on all discretionary spending, we're going to cut 2%. And we're going to give a bonus to the people that hit that 2% goal. Because you have to reorganize the way it's run. If we don't, we're going to go broke.
Yeah, we've heard you talk a lot about federal spending, specifically the economic crisis we're facing with a possible recession. I would like to look a little bit at the other issues that you're passionate about. What are some other key points that Iowans should know about your platform?
Well, I'm probably the most conservative guy on earth. You can see that because I'm a guy, here I am with all these companies, I have no debt, but I am pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, anti-China, anti-woke. I am pro-freedom. I'm pro-American worker. I'm a guy where, religion's very important to me and my family. And Jesus Christ plays a huge role in my life and my kids' life. I have 3 teenage boys, love them with all my heart. I have the greatest wife on the planet, and we love America. And we just want to continue to have America be the greatest country the world's ever known. I'm a guy literally that started with nothing. When you keep in mind, I was getting eviction notices because I couldn't pay my rent in grad school. And yet, here we are in America. And I had a job with Borg Warner when the auto industry was in trouble. The Japanese had come in with tremendous quality. They were killing us. But I thought I knew how to solve the problem. And that's when I started my first company. And I introduced statistical methods. And we started in the beginning of that operation. And we ironed out the variation. And within 4 or 5 years, we had the best quality in the world. And then I wrote a book on quality, ISO 9000, the quality standard. It took off like hotcakes.
You also mentioned that you are pro-Second Amendment.
Yes.
Now, obviously, there are concerns about school shootings. There are concerns about whether it's a mental health issue, whether it is a gun control issue. Where do you stand?
Well, obviously, we do have a huge mental health issue in the United States. It's enormous. A lot of that has been exacerbated because of COVID, too. We do have something that we have to deal with. We did have a problem in that I think we've gotten rid of a lot of the mental health facilities, too. But we have to address that issue any way you look at it. It's not just shootings. You have stabbings. You have the riots that occur. Look at Chicago and what's going on. It's not just the guns. You know, how all sorts of things that go on. And we just have to stop that. I mean, there are ways and there are things that we can do. If in the state of Michigan, there are a lot of options. But right now, we have to address the fact that we've really done something to destroy the moral fabric of America in many ways. Fortunately, in Iowa, they didn't shut everybody down like they did in Michigan. Michigan was an unmitigated disaster. You think it's bad there, go to Detroit. And in Detroit, just live there in the heart of the city for a while. I mean, I say it's bad, it's horrendous. And we have to recognize that we have to get back to what made America the great country it is. And a lot of it has to do with our traditional values. And we believed it was important to work hard. When you grew up, didn't you honestly think, okay, I can do anything I want, but I have to work to get it? That was always our philosophy. In fact, part of the joy of life is the joy of working. But when you start paying people and reward people for not working so they make more money not working than working, we go in the wrong direction. When you isolate people and you know that they need to be socialized, you know that creates a problem. So we've contributed and we've exacerbated that problem all of our life.
So I want to loop us back around. Are you saying that it is more of a mental health concern or a gun control concern, these shootings that are happening in schools?
Well, I am a believer in the Second Amendment. So you'll never get me to talk about not having guns.
If you were president, let's say hypothetically, you would never enforce any gun control or restrictions.
I'm not going to alter the Second Amendment.
Okay.
No.
Now let's pivot and talk a little bit about your home state of Michigan.
Yes.
You have spoken out against the electric vehicle plants that have been in talks of being brought up there in the heart of the automotive
You mean
state.
against the batteries? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're being made by Chinese that we're paying $4 billion to come in. Yes.
So, why are you so vehemently against them? What makes you feel so strongly against having electric vehicle plants in Michigan?
Oh, wait. I didn't say that. I said we don't send $4 billion to the Chinese to build a battery factory. Two issues. We get an American company. Is there anything wrong with having an American company build the battery factory? And if they don't have the technology, can't we partner with one of our allies? I happen to know Panasonic makes batteries. I know their companies. We have companies over there in Germany that make batteries. We have companies that are clients of mine. There's no reason on earth that we have to go and try to give money to a company affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party in order to get a battery factory in Michigan. That's what I demonstrated against. I thought it was ridiculous.
So
we're going broke in the process.
What would you do to help encourage U.S. companies to then create more EV factories here in the United States?
Well, understand what's really happened. The government has really exacerbated the problem by giving this incentive. I think at this point it's $7,500 or something like that, depending on the car. But you can get these, they're incentivizing us to have even more electric cars. But understand, what people don't realize is that when you build that electric car, they have a battery that goes inside. Now, the battery is made in China. They make it with coal. Now it varies depending on the size of the battery, but there are batteries there where you have to literally drive for 7 years to equal the amount of pollution we put in the air when the Chinese make those batteries. And we all live in the same earth. So, heck, do you know that I'm like one of the few guys in the world that is an expert in ISO 14000. That's a standard. I wrote the book on that too. That's the environmental standard. So we're talking to a guy that knows what's going on. Here's what amazes me. I find it incredible, actually. Biden decides that he is going to stop all drilling on federal lands for petroleum. He just decided that. We had to take him to court. We eventually got some, but we're back to where we were in Truman years when we talk about production on federal lands. So as a result, we didn't have enough oil for our own country, and we had to go and spend $61 billion to buy it from Russia. I'm not making this up. We spent $61 billion to buy it from Russia, And when Russia goes and extracts and refines that oil, they do such a worse job of contaminating the earth. I think it's somewhere between 4 and 5 times the amount of methane enters the air when they go and produce that natural gas from that oil. And here we are contaminating the earth more because of the fact that we decided we're going to produce less oil. But by doing that also, we raise the price of gas. So once again, thank the government. Is this even reasonable? I say to myself, this is nuttier than all get out. And other people don't understand what really goes on. They've got everybody buffaloed. But when you're talking to a guy who literally wrote the book on ISO 14000, actually 2 books, one by McGraw-Hill, one by Wiley, a guy who is an expert in the field, a guy who's one of the major accreditors of 14,000, I know what's going on. We also had a clean development mechanism company. In fact, we ended up in a situation, I don't know if you really want to get involved in this, where they wanted the United States to sign on to this protocol, and it was the Paris Protocol. That was one of the worst possible protocols for the US in history. China wasn't going to ever decrease the amount of emissions. In fact, they weren't decreasing the rate of increase until 2026. They're treating China like a third world country. China's not a third world country right now. They are the second largest economy in the world, and they're the second largest economy by a substantial margin now. Whereas back in the 1990s, the second largest economy in the world used to be Japan. They've eclipsed Japan. They're literally 3 times their size.
Clearly, you have strong feelings about China, and I want to pivot now quickly before I let you go to your campaign approach. There are some elements of your campaign. You're all over Iowa. You're posting all over social media of all the places. I saw you on a tractor the other day.
Was that a ball?
And so I kind of, what it makes me reminiscent of is the Jimmy Carter approach. Can you talk a little bit about your decision on how you're campaigning?
Well, it was a discussion that I had with a strategist that I had. And we sat back and talked about how can I really get my message across? Now, I happen to be running on policies that I think are very key. So I'm not just running and giving a bunch of speeches and hoopla and saying we've got A, B, C wrong. I actually have a message and a plan that I know is going to work. But I know I can't possibly get this across unless I actually visit and talk to people. And the one state in the world where I can go in and talk to people and visit and have retail politics is Iowa. Let's face it, Iowa is the heart of the breadbasket of America. And when I'm in Iowa, I feel like I'm at home because I grew up in a town called Dalton, Illinois. It's about 20 miles south of Chicago, about 10,000 people. And when I'm here, it's like I'm just at home. And I thought I could relate best to the people here.
Well, and I have to ask, what does your family think of you running for president? I mean, are they with you on the campaign trail? What are they doing?
My wife is right here. My son is flying in. He's at Michigan State right now, and he flew in today to be here. And he's very active in politics. He's gotten involved. He went to CPAC. We were at CPAC. He was there. In fact, the whole thing has been very interesting and fascinating. But you know, the greatest thing about it is that you feel like you have a chance to make a difference. And there's nothing in this world that's more gratifying than when you feel that you're doing something, not for the money, but just because you want to make the world a better place.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. I know you have a lot to get to. And thank you for joining us for Eye on Iowa.
Thank you.